It is time for Law in Our Life. Hyunjoo is here in the studio. She is a lawyer who practices here in Gwangju. She's going to help us understand more about laws in Korea. Hello, Hyunjoo.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. You know, we're here in December, and Christmas is coming. Do you like Christmas?
Sure.
You seem like the kind of you seem like a Christmas kind of person.
Yeah.
You seem like you'd like it. And, you know, Christmas is coming, and we're talking about families, and we're specifically talking about adoption.
Right.
And what did we talk about last week?
Last week we talked about general adoption and full adoption.
Mm-hmm.
The full adoption is more close to the idea that we have about adoption. Like the biological parents will no longer be the parents. They will go out of, like, disappear from the picture, and the child will have a new family name.
Right, yeah. This is more like the Western concept, I think.
Sure.
Or at least, and probably more like the Western circumstances as well.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about it.
As it is a critical change of an adoptee's life, the law requires more strict requirements for the full adoption.
Mm-hmm.
The biological parents should express the consent to the full adoption. What if I have a baby out of wedlock and the biological father of the child does not know about the baby yet?
Uh-huh.
Like in that case, how can I have my baby be adopted without, like, the father's consent? Because the law says there should be the consent of
Sure.
the parents.
Uh-huh.
In those cases, it's possible without the consent of the biological father, as he did not recognize the baby yet.
Right.
Like, he doesn't know there is a baby.
Uh-huh.
There is, like, no legal father-child relationship formed yet.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, the mother can make such decision by herself.
What if the mother just didn't tell the father?
That's still possible.
That's
because,
still possible?
Yes, there is, like,
There's no relationship
no.
yet? Okay. So it's, you know, the woman's body, the woman's baby.
Mm-hmm.
All right, fair enough. What are some other circumstances?
Also, the kids at the orphanage or foster care homes can be adopted without the consent of the legal representatives if the biological parents lost their parental rights by court decision or their whereabouts are unknown.
All right. And this is the situation I guess I know a little more about because I used to volunteer at this orphanage quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, listeners, don't forget the Adopt a Child for Christmas fundraiser going on to try and get those kids at the orphanage's presents for Christmas. There, we did our little plug. Let's keep going.
Yeah. So many people consider adopting the child of, like, the spouse from his or her previous marriage to form a whole, like, happy family.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one thing that you should know about full adoption before you make such a move.
Okay.
Let's say that you are married to a person who has been married before and has children from the previous marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Then you thought it would be nice to accept her kids as your kids. So you agreed to adopt her children from previous marriage.
Sure.
However, life does not always go the way you want.
Mm-hmm.
So you have trouble with your wife now and are considering divorce.
Oh, no.
Then you're thinking about the children, the adopted children. You may not want to be, like, tied to those children as the relationship was first created not by birth but by marriage.
Uh-huh. All right. They're not your biological children.
No.
Okay.
So many think that they can terminate the adoption when they get divorced, as the kids were originally the wife's kids, or like your husband's kids.
Okay.
But the court thinks differently.
Mm-hmm.
In one case, the father decided to get divorced and filed a lawsuit to terminate the adoptive father-adoptee daughter relationship, as the daughter was the child from the wife's previous marriage.
Okay.
The daughter expressed her wish to have the dad and wanted to be his girl.
Okay. Wow.
The father argued that the primary reason of the divorce is the daughter, and she does not admit him as father, but only asks him to take legal and financial responsibility as a legal father.
Oh, wow.
So he argued that her behavior is inhumane and unacceptable in social norms. Yeah, I can, like, kind of understand the father's stance.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, if what he's saying is true, then you'd feel taken advantage of, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
However, the court weighed in the adoptee daughter's opinion and rejected the request of termination of adoption.
So how can full adoption be terminated?
To terminate full adoption, there are only two options. One is when the adoptive parents abuse, abandon, or materially harm the welfare of the adoptee.
Mm-hmm.
Or when it is impossible to maintain the full adoption, as the adoptee behaved against the social norms and acted inhumanely to the adoptive parents.
Mm-hmm.
So, based on the criteria, the father could not win the game.
I see. So, how does it shake out for that adoptive father then?
So, what is the fate of the adoptive father? Even though he can terminate the marital relationship with the wife,
Mm-hmm.
he cannot get out of the father-child relationship once it is formed.
Mm-hmm.
After the divorce, he will bear the burden of child support, like his own child,
Uh-huh.
and when he dies, his assets will be passed on to the adoptive daughter.
Wow.
Because she's his daughter.
Right, and following the asset inheritance rules that you described a couple weeks earlier.
Yes.
Okay.
So it might be something that he did not consider when he first decided to adopt the child in full adoption.
Yeah. Wow. Now I can't imagine that he thought about, the way that this choice would affect things. The choice to make the adoption, right?
In the actual case, the situation was the father had children from his previous marriage.
Mm-hmm.
The wife had children from previous marriage.
Okay.
But they didn't adopt all children at once.
Okay.
But first adopted the children of wives.
Oh, okay.
So the father's children were not adopted by the wife,
Mm-hmm.
but the wife's children were adopted by the father.
Wow.
And that in that situation, they decided to get divorced.
Uh-huh.
So now the father has his children and the wife's children.
Right.
Under his name.
Yeah. But he just has but
she
just has her daughter.
Yes.
And any other children that weren't accepted yet. It's very complicated.
Yes.
And so I guess you need to be careful.
Sure.
If you're making this decision.
Yeah. It's something that people don't think that much at the very beginning, but later they find out they're kind of in a trap if it doesn't work out very well.
And I mean, I get it. It's it's hard to think about. If you're marrying someone, you don't want to be thinking about divorce.
Mm-hmm.
If you're adopting your spouse's children, you don't want to think about them trying to give you the shaft and take advantage of you. But I think people look at things through some pretty rose-colored glasses sometimes,
mm-hmm.
and really try and think things are going to work out for them. And this is an example where this is serious.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. I don't know. We have a little time. Are there any other kind of interesting examples or stories about anything like this happening? I'm putting you on the spot.
Maybe next time I can talk about international adoption.
Oh.
Adoption by foreigners in Korea, because I
All
got
right.
some inquiries about can I adopt a child while I stay in Korea?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's
So.
interesting. I think some people I know have asked about that before because we have so many foreigners, working down at that orphanage.
Okay.
Before we talk anymore, there's one thing I want to talk about, how some of these kids get at the orphanage that to me was a big shock.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's a legal perspective you can give, but when I first, when I came here, I had just in Canada before that been working with foster kids in the care of the government.
Yeah.
And they were in the care of the government for, usually they had been removed from
Mm-hmm.
their original parents' homes
Mm-hmm.
for, various horrible reasons.
Yep.
And then when I came here and my friend asked me to volunteer at the orphanage, I thought maybe it'd be similar circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But I found out later that a lot of those girls had been put up for adoption because their parents had gotten divorced.
Oh.
And that was it.
Okay.
And so that was, to me, a really big culture shock, that you would put up your children for adoption because you were no longer a couple and it was too hard to be single and have a child.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big shock. And so when I hear about, when you mentioned the general adoption, maybe it would be for children in those kinds of circumstances that the parents are still in the picture.
Yeah,
All
right. I also volunteer at the orphanage, and what I heard was nowadays there are not many like orphans who like their parents passed away, but more like in your, as you said, people who like put their kids in the orphanage and then don't come back any
Yeah.
longer, or rarely comes, like once a year, just to visit the children.
Right. Yeah. It's a different sort of thing. It was, to be honest, it's a cultural difference I still haven't really gotten over entirely. Well, thank you so much for coming in. This is also on YouTube, right?
Yes. You can find this segment in video and my YouTube channel. You can find me by searching Korean Law 101 on YouTube or Facebook.
All right. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
There we go.